The first time Elias Hart saw her, she was standing at the edge of the burned meadow where the wind cut like a blade, wrapped in a threadbare shawl, staring at the mountains as if they might answer her grief, and something in the stillness of her posture stopped him mid-step, because men who had survived winters alone in the frontier learned to recognize loneliness the way sailors recognize storms, not by the noise, but by the pressure in the air. And Elias, who had buried his wife 2 winters before and spoken more to his axe than to people since, felt that pressure settle into his chest like a held breath. The settlement was 3 miles behind him, the trail ahead narrow and half swallowed by snow, and the rumors about Apaches were as thick as the pine needles underfoot. Yet what he saw was not an enemy or a threat, but a woman whose eyes carried the quiet ache of someone who had lost a home. So he did the only thing that felt honest, which was to stop, lower his axe, and speak softly as if he were afraid of startling a wounded bird, offering water, then a blanket, then silence when she did not answer. And in that silence he realized that kindness did not require permission, only courage. He built the cabin that same day, not because she asked, she never did, but because the wind was cruel and the sky promised snow, and a man who had once loved deeply knew that love's smallest cousin, compassion, could still warm the hands when nothing else would, so he chose a clearing near the creek, felled dead wood to avoid killing living trees, measured twice before every cut, and raised a single-room shelter with a low hearth and a door that closed tight, working until his shoulders burned and his breath came out in white clouds, while she watched from a distance, never closer than the length of a shadow, her face unreadable, her presence steady. And when the last plank was set, he stepped back and gestured with open palms, offering the cabin as one might offer a prayer, then left, without asking her name because he remembered how grief could make questions feel like knives. That night the snow came heavy and relentless, and Elias slept little, wondering if he had done something foolish or dangerous or simply human. And at dawn, when the world lay quiet beneath a white blanket, he woke to the sound of footsteps that were too heavy to be deer and too measured to be wolves. A sound that carried intention, and when he opened his door he found 3 men standing in the clearing, each tall as a pine, broad-shouldered and solemn, their presence so commanding that the forest itself seemed to lean in, and before fear could fully form, one of them spoke in careful English, his voice deep and steady, calling Elias son-in-law, a word that landed with the weight of destiny and confusion, and Elias stood there stunned, heart hammering, mind racing through 1,000 possible endings, until the second man stepped forward and placed a hand over his heart, explaining that the woman was their sister, that she had lost her husband and child in a raid not of Elias's people but of bandits who wore no tribe's colors, that grief had driven her to wander, and that in their way of life a man who built shelter for a widow without asking for anything in return had shown a bond stronger than blood, had shown that his spirit was already woven into theirs. Elias tried to speak but found his throat tight, memories of his own loss flooding back, the small hands he would never hold again, the voice that once filled his cabin with laughter, and in that shared ache he understood something he had never learned from books or sermons, that pain did not belong to one people or another. It belonged to being alive, and kindness was the only language it recognized. So he nodded, invited them in, fed them what little he had, and listened as they spoke of their sister, whose name was Ayana, which meant eternal blossom, a name that felt like a promise she herself no longer believed. And as the fire crackled, the third giant, the eldest, told Elias that Ayana had slept through the storm in the cabin, safe and warm for the first time in months, and that when she woke she had cried, not from fear but from relief. And those tears, the elder said, were sacred, for they watered the ground where new beginnings grow. The unexpected turn came not in the form of violence but of responsibility, for the brothers did not demand marriage or allegiance, they offered choice, explaining that son-in-law was not a chain but a bridge, an invitation to walk into a larger family if Elias wished, or to step back with honor if he did not. And Elias felt the weight of his solitude then, the long evenings speaking to ghosts, the ache of surviving without living, and he realized that compassion, once given, had already changed him, had already opened a door he could not close, So he agreed to meet Ayana properly, not as a savior or owner but as a fellow traveler, and when she came, her eyes met his with a cautious strength that mirrored his own, and they spoke little, letting the fire and the wind speak for them, discovering in small gestures, a shared cup of water, a mended sleeve, a smile that arrived late but stayed. That healing did not require erasing the past, only making room for it. Seasons turned, and the cabin became a home that welcomed both languages, both silences, children's laughter from the tribe mixing with the creak of Elias's old rocking chair, and when conflict threatened, as it always does on the frontier, it was compassion that disarmed it, for the story of the cabin spread, softening hearts on both sides, reminding neighbors that generosity could redraw borders more effectively than fear. And in the emotional climax of this shared life, when a harsh winter returned and supplies ran thin, it was the three giants who arrived at dawn with sleds of food, calling Elias brother this time, and it was Ayana who took his hand and led him outside to watch the sun rise over the mountains, telling him that the blossom of her name had not died, only waited for shelter. And Elias, feeling the warmth of family where emptiness once lived, understood that the cabin he had built was never just wood and nails. It was a choice to believe that humanity could outbuild hatred, that one act of selflessness could echo outward, transforming strangers into kin. And as the years passed and the forest reclaimed the clearing, travelers would still hear the story of the man who built a cabin for a lone woman and woke to find giants calling him son-in-law, not as a tale of danger, but as a testament to hope, a reminder that when we choose kindness in the face of fear, we do not merely help another survive the night. We help ourselves remember what it means to belong, and in that remembering, the world grows a little warmer, a little braver, and infinitely more human.